If this is you, if you wake up some days feeling tired, not just in your body, but in your soul, if you've been strong for a long time, quietly carrying things no one ever sees, if you've ever wondered whether your effort matters, whether you matter, then this moment is for you. Life doesn't always hit us with explosions. Sometimes it wears us down softly, day by day. But here's the truth, the fact that you're still here, still trying, still breathing, that means something. And today, we're going to talk about why your story isn't over, why you're stronger than you think, and why choosing to keep going is one of the bravest things a human being can do. You wake up and the world already feels a step ahead of you, not rushing, not loud, just heavy, like it's been moving all night while you were trying to rest, and now it's asking you to catch up without explaining what you missed. If this is you, you probably don't complain much. You've learned how to keep going without making a scene. You know how to smile when someone asks how you're doing, not because you're pretending, but because you don't want to make the moment harder than it needs to be. You've figured out that life doesn't always give space for long explanations, so you've learned to compress your feelings into something manageable, something quiet. You still show up. That's the thing. Even on the days when your chest feels tight for no clear reason, even when your mind keeps replaying old conversations or missed chances or words you wish you'd said differently, you still show up. You go where you're supposed to go. You do what needs to be done. You carry responsibility like it's second nature, even when it weighs more than anyone realizes. And maybe nobody notices. Or maybe they notice but don't know what to say. Or maybe they assume you're fine because you don't fall apart in public. If this is you, you've probably been strong longer than you ever planned to be. Strength wasn't a goal, it was a necessity. Somewhere along the way, life asked you to hold more than you were ready for, and you didn't really get a choice. You adapted. You learned how to survive moments that felt too big, emotions that felt too sharp, losses that didn't come with instructions. You didn't become cold, though. That's important. You could have. You had every reason to. But instead, you stayed soft in a world that often rewards hardness. You care deeply. Sometimes that feels like a weakness, especially when you give more than you receive. You listen, you remember details, you notice when someone's energy changes, when their smile doesn't quite reach their eyes. You offer patience even when you're running low on it yourself. And maybe you've wondered why love seems to cost you more than it costs others, why opening your heart feels like standing in the rain without an umbrella while everyone else stays dry. But you still believe in love. Not the loud, perfect kind, the real kind, the kind that shows up on ordinary days, the kind that forgives, that stays, that tries again even after disappointment. You believe in connection, in shared silence, in being there when words aren't enough, and that belief hasn't been easy to protect. It's been tested by broken promises, by people who didn't know how to hold what you offered, by moments where you felt invisible even while standing right in front of someone. If this is you, you've probably felt unseen in ways that are hard to explain, not ignored exactly, just missed. Like people see the version of you that functions, but not the one that feels. They see what you do, not what it costs you to do it. They see your reliability, your calm, your kindness, but not the effort it takes to maintain those things when you're tired, when you're hurting, when you're unsure. You've learned how to be there for others, even when no one asks how you're holding up. And when someone finally does ask, you hesitate, not because you don't want to share, but because you don't want to be a burden. You don't want to shift the weight of your feelings onto someone else's day. So you edit yourself, you simplify, you say, I'm okay, and hope that's enough to keep things moving. There's a quiet loneliness in that, not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from being surrounded and still feeling like no one fully knows you. You can be in a room full of people and feel like you're standing just a few inches outside the circle, close enough to hear the laughter, close enough to be included, but still holding something back, and yet you keep your heart open. That's not accidental. That's a choice you've made over and over again. a choice to not let disappointment turn into bitterness, a choice to not let pain teach you cruelty, a choice to believe that just because something hurt doesn't mean it was meaningless. You understand that love isn't always gentle, but you also understand that it's worth it. That even when it breaks, it leaves something behind that matters. If this is you, you've probably had moments where you questioned your own value, not in a dramatic woo, just quietly, late at night, in between thoughts. You've wondered if you're doing enough, if you are enough, if the way you move through the world actually makes a difference to anyone else. You've replayed your mistakes more vividly than your successes. You've held yourself to standards you'd never impose on someone you love. But here's the truth you rarely stop to consider. The way you move through the world matters more than you think. The calm you bring into tense moments, the way you listen without interrupting, the way you offer understanding instead of judgment. These things ripple outward in ways you may never see. Someone carries your kindness with them long after the moment has passed. Someone feels less alone because you were willing to be present. Someone learned that gentleness still exists because you refuse to let life harden you. You don't need to be louder to be powerful. You don't need to be flawless to be worthy. You don't need to have everything figured out to deserve love and respect. The fact that you're still here, still trying, still choosing compassion in a world that often pushes the opposite, says more about your strength than any achievement ever could. If this is you, you may not realize how rare you are. People who feel deeply and still show up, people who have been hurt and still believe, people who carry pain without turning it into a weapon. That kind of person changes the world quietly, not with grand gestures, but with consistency, with integrity, with a steady presence that others lean on, sometimes without even realizing it. And maybe you're tired. That matters too. Being strong doesn't mean being endless. It doesn't mean never needing rest. It doesn't mean carrying everything alone forever. Even the most resilient hearts need space to breathe. Even the most giving souls deserve to receive. There is no failure in needing support. There is no weakness in admitting that some days are heavier than others. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to feel conflicted. You are allowed to want more than what you've been given so far. Wanting more doesn't make you ungrateful. It means you're alive. It means you still believe that life can be deeper, richer, more honest than what you've experienced up to this point. If this is you, know this without needing proof or permission. You are not invisible. Even when it feels like your efforts disappear into the background, they matter. You matter. The love you give is real. The pain you've survived is real. The person you are becoming, shaped by both, is real. And there is something profoundly human, profoundly brave about continuing to choose love, empathy, and presence in a world that doesn't always make that choice easy. You don't need to rush your healing. You don't need to explain your journey to anyone who hasn't walked beside you. You don't need to harden yourself to be safe. You can remain open and still protect your peace. You can care deeply and still set boundaries. You can be gentle without being fragile. If this is you, keep going, not because you owe the world anything, but because your existence has meaning beyond productivity, beyond recognition, beyond validation. Because the way you feel, the way you love, the way you endure, all speak to a depth that this world desperately needs more of, even when it doesn't always know how to ask for it, even when it doesn't always know how to hold it, even when it overlooks it in favor of louder, faster, harder things, even when the quiet strength you carry feels like it's moving through space without leaving marks. Even when you wonder if anyone would notice if you stopped trying so hard, even when the nights feel longer than the days and your thoughts circle back to the same questions, even when you're not sure who you're becoming, but you know who you refuse to become, even when love feels risky and hope feels fragile and faith feels more like a whisper than a certainty, even when all you can do is take one more step forward without knowing exactly where it leads, without knowing who will walk beside you, without knowing how long it will take. without knowing if the effort will be returned in the way you imagine, without knowing if the world will ever fully see you in the way you deserve to be seen. You love deeply, even when the world keeps telling you not to, not with noise or performance, not with conditions stacked like contracts, but with presence, with attention, with the kind of care that doesn't ask for applause. If this is you, you've noticed how guarded people have become, how quickly they pull back, how often love is treated like a transaction instead of a connection. You've felt that shift, that subtle hardening in the way people speak, the way they commit halfway, the way they leave exits open just in case staying becomes uncomfortable, and still you choose love, not because it's easy, but because it feels honest, because closing your heart would cost you more than keeping it open ever could. You've seen what happens when people stop feeling. You've seen how bitterness grows quietly, how cynicism disguises itself as wisdom, how detachment gets praised as strength. And somewhere inside you, you decided that even if the world moves in that direction, you don't have to follow. If this is you, you've probably been told you care too much, that you should be more careful, more strategic, less available. You've heard advice wrapped in concern that really just means don't get hurt again. And maybe you've tried, maybe you've attempted to love less, to hold back, to protect yourself by shrinking what you give, but it never lasts. Because loving deeply isn't something you do, it's who you are. You don't love for the reward, you love because connection matters to you. Because seeing another person fully and letting yourself be seen feels like the point. You believe that love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up with honesty, about staying present in the uncomfortable moments, about choosing understanding when it would be easier to walk away, and that choice hasn't come without cost. You've felt the ache of giving your heart to people who didn't know how to hold it. You've experienced the quiet disappointment of realizing that not everyone speaks the same emotional language you do, that what feels like commitment to you feels like pressure to someone else, that what feels like vulnerability to you feels like risk to others. If this is you, you've probably questioned whether loving deeply is a mistake late at night in the stillness. You've wondered if you'd be safer caring less, expecting less, hoping less. You've watched people move through relationships untouched, unbothered, seemingly unaffected, and you've asked yourself if you missed some lesson everyone else learned. How to keep things light, how to leave before it hurts, how to treat love like something disposable, but you didn't miss the lesson. You rejected it because you understand something important, that love isn't meant to be efficient. It isn't meant to be painless. It's meant to be real. And real things leave marks. Real things change you. Real things ask something of you. You're not interested in connections that can be dropped without consequence. You want depth. You want truth. You want the kind of love that requires courage. If this is you, you've probably learned to love without guarantees. You don't love because you're sure it will last forever. You love because it's right in the moment, because someone's presence matters now, because shared time, shared laughter, shared silence all carry weight, even if they don't stretch endlessly into the future. You understand that impermanence doesn't erase meaning. You also know what it's like to love quietly, without grand gestures, without dramatic declarations. You love in the details, in remembering how someone takes their coffee, in noticing when they're tired, in giving space when they need it, and closeness when they don't know how to ask. Your love is steady, consistent. It doesn't demand attention, but it deserves recognition. And maybe that's where it hurts sometimes, because deep love in a hardened world often goes unnoticed. People get used to it, they assume it will always be there. They forget that your care is a choice, not an obligation, that your patience is something you offer, not something they're entitled to. And when that happens, you feel it, not as anger, but as a quiet sadness, a realization that what you give so freely isn't always understood. If this is you, you've also learned that loving deeply doesn't mean losing yourself. You've been there. You've crossed that line before. You've mistaken endurance for devotion. You've stayed longer than you should have, hoping that your love would be enough to fix what wasn't yours to fix. And you paid attention when that cost you your peace. So now your love has boundaries, not walls, but clarity. You still care, but you don't abandon yourself to prove it. You've learned that love doesn't require self erasure, that choosing someone else shouldn't mean choosing against yourself. And that lesson wasn't easy. It came from experience, from loss, from moments where you had to let go, even though your heart wasn't ready. If this is you, you know that loving deeply means being brave over and over again. It means risking disappointment. It means staying open even after you've been hurt. It means believing that connection is worth the vulnerability it demands. And some days that bravery feels exhausting. Some days you wish you could turn it off just for a while, just to rest. But even then, your heart doesn't harden. It slows. It becomes more selective, more intentional, but it doesn't close because you understand that the world doesn't need more people who feel nothing. It needs people who feel deeply and still choose kindness, still choose empathy, still choose to care even when it would be easier not to. If this is you, your love changes rooms. It softens conversations. It makes people feel seen even when they don't know why. Your presence carries a warmth that can't be faked. And while not everyone will value that, the ones who do will recognize it immediately. They'll feel it. They'll understand that what you offer is rare. You don't love because you're naive. You love because you're intentional, because you've seen the alternative and decided it isn't for you, because you know that a guarded heart may avoid pain, but it also avoids depth. And depth matters to you more than comfort. Truth matters to you more than ease. If this is you, keep loving the way you do, not recklessly, not blindly, but honestly. Let the world be as hardened as it wants. You don't need to mirror it. Your softness is not a flaw. Your emotional openness is not a liability. It's a strength that requires courage, self-awareness, and resilience. You are not behind for wanting something real. You are not weak for feeling deeply. You are not foolish for believing that love can still be meaningful in a time when people treat it casually. The fact that you continued to love with intention says something powerful about who you are and what you value, about the kind of connections you're willing to fight for, about the kind of life you're trying to build, about the refusal to let disappointment define you, about the decision to remain human in a world that often rewards detachment, about choosing depth over distance, presence over protection, sincerity over strategy, even when it costs you, even when it hurts, even when you don't know how it will end, even when loving feels like standing still while the rest of the world keeps moving faster, even when your heart feels exposed and uncertain and tired, D, even when all you can do is keep showing up as yourself without armor, without guarantees, without pretending that you don't care, without pretending that love doesn't matter, without pretending that connection is replaceable, without pretending that feeling deeply is something to be ashamed of, without pretending that a hardened heart is the same as a healed one.